In this example, we're going to look at some operating transactions throughout the fiscal year for a city, and then at the end of the year do the financial statements. Okay, so we have all this information. We're going to do the general journal entries, and for the year to the general fund and the governmental activities fund, and then we're going to prepare a fund balance sheet and a statement of revenues. So we're going to go through each one of these activities. I'm just going to throw really quick in here so I can number those journal entries. So we're going to look at debits and credits. Okay, so the first journal entry, number 1. We have the budget for the year totaling revenues of $3,140,000 and appropriations totaling $3,100,000. So in our general fund, we are going to record a debit to estimated revenues and a credit to appropriations. And then because the amounts are different and our debits have to equal our credits, we're also going to credit our budgetary fund balance. This one. Okay. So estimated revenues, $3,140,000. Nope, too many zeros. And appropriations of $3.1 million. And because debits have to equal credits, then we have a credit of $40,000 to the budgetary fund balance. So now, journal entry 2. The City Council authorized temporary borrowing of $500,000 in the form of a 120-day tax anticipation note from a local bank at 6% annum. So $500,000, and we got it at a discount. Okay. So we're going to look at 2. We have in our general fund, we received cash. Okay, we received it at a discount of 6%, and it was a 120-day note, so 3 months out of 12, or a third of the year. So if you take 500,000 times 6% times 1/3, we get 490,000. We then have expenditures, 2020. And we're going to debit or credit tax anticipation note payable. For $500,000. Okay, then under the governmental activities, we received cash of $490,000. We have expenses for the general government. And then we have tax anticipation notes payable. So debit of $10,000 and a credit of $500,000. Now transaction number 3. Transaction number 3, our property tax levy for FY 2020 was recorded. Our taxable property for the year was $43 million, and our tax rate was $5 per 100. we estimated that 3% of this levy would be uncollectible. Okay, so if you take that 43 million times $5 per 100, we get taxes receivable. Oh, this is in our general fund. Current of $2,150,000. We are going to say that 2% is, or, excuse me, 3% is uncollectible. And then we record our revenues of $2,150,000. And then in our government activities, it is exactly the same. Number 4, purchase order and contracts were issued to vendors and others in the amount of $2,060,000. So we created vouchers. In our general fund, we then have encumbrances and encumbrances outstanding. Of $2,060,000. Okay. And there is no entry in governmental activities. Okay, now we're to transaction 5. Transaction 5 says we received current taxes, delinquent taxes, and interest and penalties, and that the delinquent taxes and interest and penalties were collected more than 60 days after the prior year end. So we're going to record that we received cash. And the transactions under both general fund and government activities are the same for this. So we received cash in the amount of $2,670,840. We have taxes receivable current, taxes receivable delinquent, and interest and penalties receivable. Okay. And then we're also going to record that deferred inflows of resources for the amount of back taxes that we received. Then in the governmental activities, the only part that you have to record is the receipt of cash and the taxes that you received that from. Now we're ready for transaction 6. Transaction 6, it says additional interest and penalties on delinquent taxes were accrued in the amount of $3,430, of which 30% was estimated to be uncollectible. Okay. So we have interest and penalties receivable, $3,430. Our allowance for uncollectible interest and penalties, 30%, and revenues. And then, so that was under, just going to move all this down one and put governmental general fund. And then we'll do the governmental activities. So we have interest and penalties receivable of $3,430. Save these. Just this revenues account has a different name. So it's general revenues, interest, and penalties on delinquent taxes, and I'm going to abbreviate that. So the amounts are the same. The accounts are just named slightly different in the different journals. Transaction 7. Because of a change in state law, the city is notified it's going to receive $80,000 less in intergovernmental revenues than was budgeted. So the state made some changes, and now we aren't going to get as much of our revenue that we budgeted. So we're going to make adjustments to our budget in the general fund. So 80,000, and there is no in the governmental activities. Okay, now number 8. Number 8 says delinquent taxes of $12,792 were deemed uncollectible and written off. The associated interest and penalties were also written off. So since the transactions are the same under both the general fund and governmental activities, I'm only going to post it once, but know that you would do it twice, once in the general fund and once in for uncollectible taxes. And then we have the interest and penalties. And taxes receivable delinquent. So this is writing off. These two are going to be credits. And the taxes were $12,792. The interest was $952. Okay, transaction 9. Total payroll during the year was $819,490. We withheld $62,690 for FICA. Then we also withheld federal tax and state taxes we paid in cash. So number 9 here. Okay, in our general fund, we have expenditures, and then we have due to federal government, due to state government, and then cash that we paid for wages. Okay, so we have that the total amount of wages was $819,490. So we have 819,490. And then what we have to pay the federal government was $166,400. And to the state, $34,400. So the cash is the whatever makes the journal entry balance. Okay. And then in the governmental activities, it's the same exact except we use the word expenses instead of expenditures. Transaction 10. We're almost done with our transactions, and then I'll go to another video for the 2 financial statements so these videos don't get too long. So transaction 10, our FICA tax liability was recorded for $62,690. So we have in the general, we have expenditures, and then due to federal government, $62,690. And then in governmental activities, we have expenses and due to federal government. Transaction 11. We have revenues from sources other than taxes were collected in the amount of $947,000. So we have our general fund. We received cash in the form of revenues. So we're going to debit cash and credit revenues. We have cash, and then our revenues would be itemized by program. if we were doing that detail, which just for the case of this, we are not. We'll look at those in further detail in future chapters. Transaction 12. We are going to pay the amounts due to the federal government and the amounts for taxes during the year. So in both due to federal government and due to state government and vouchers payable. Then 13, purchase orders and contracts encumbered in the amount of $1,988,040 were filled at a new cost of $1,987,570, which was vouchered. Okay, so 13, in our general fund, we have encumbrances. And encumbrances outstanding. So we encumbered for $1,988,040. And the expense and vouchers payable was actually $1,987,570. And under governmental activities, we have expenses and vouchers payable. Transaction 14, we paid vouchers payable in cash. So we have 14 vouchers payable, were paid after deducting a credit for purchases discount of $8,030,000. So in our general fund, we have vouchers payable, cash, and then we reduce our expenditures by the amount of the purchases discount. And of course, the cash that we paid is the difference between the two. And then governmental activities. The only different would be that we call that account expenses and government activities and expenditures in the general fund. Okay. Transaction 15, we are paying back the tax anticipation note. with cash. On the 16th, we have all of our unpaid taxes became delinquent. 2 more transactions. So on the 16th, we're going to record that we had delinquent taxes. So we have our general fund. Taxes, receivable, current, and you can combine this. Credit. We're going to reverse that, the allowance we put in when we first recorded the taxes, and we have delinquent taxes for $189,000. Then in governmental activities, we're going to reduce our revenues by debiting revenues, and then we're going to credit deferred inflows on available revenues. Okay, for $126,901. So it is $189,000 minus $64,500, and then also takes into account the interest and penalties from entry 6. Then our last transaction, 17. We have a physical inventory of materials and supplies, showed a total of $9,100, and they used the purchases method in the general fund and the consumption method at the government-wide level. Okay, so we're going to record the general fund. If you come up and look at the amount of supplies we have, so you'll see we have 6,100, but it showed we had 9,100, so we're going to do a $3,000 adjustment. So we have inventory of supplies and fund balance, non-spendable, inventory of supplies for $3,000. And no entry required in governmental activities. Okay, so I'm going to do, because this video got so long, doing the entries, but I really wanted them to all be together. We're going to do the closing entries and the financial statements in another video.